Like to call the executive committee meeting to order, Mr. Byrne. You can squeeze us in your schedule. Have our people call your people. Could I get a roll call, please? And thank you. It's already out.
Mr. Tripp? Present. Mr. Washington? Present. Mr. Legess? Mr. Vickery? Present. Mr. Olthoff? Mr. Hess? Mr. McConnell? Present. Mr. Snipes? Present. Mr. Byrne? Present. Mr. Seroy? Ms. Weber? Mr. Lear? Mr. Wheeler? Present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Under public comment, I have one. I have Brooke Love from Bradley. Right back in the microphone over there.
Okay, sorry, I'm a little short, so I'll just talk a little bit louder.
No, you got to talk in the
sorry.
mic, sorry.
I do apologize.
Just don't drop it.
Perfect. Okay, good morning, everyone. And I thank you for you taking the time to see me. My name is Brooke Love, as mentioned. I live in Bradley, Illinois. I've lived there for about 3 years now. I personally, myself, am a certified and licensed pastry chef and have been for about 18 years now. I've worked around up north and everything like that. Then after moving to Kankakee County about 3 years ago, kind of thought that my specialty area of work is something that is not very well represented in the area, and I would love to expand that down here. So I am here asking for your support in the Home Kitchen Act, which is also known as the Cupcake Law. It is a statewide law. It's a state law. Each county just needs to adopt it. Do understand that out of all of the counties in Illinois, since this has been it has been a law since 2014, only 8 counties have accepted it. Number one, most people don't know about it. Most people do not realize that once it's a state law, that it allows you guys, then you guys have to accept it, of which not only do you have to accept it, then it has to be passed to the city that you live in to accept it. The Home Kitchen Act allows the sale of baked goods produced in the kitchen of a person's primary residence. It is limited to $1,000 a month, and every product needs to be labeled and mentioned that it is made in a home kitchen. This only pertains to non-potentially hazardous baked goods. And this is outlined just as in the cottage food operation, which allows the sale of these exact same items to be sold at farmers markets. This would include breads, cookies, cupcakes, anything non-perishable. Once you get into doing cheesecakes or pumpkin pies or any sort of custard, anything that can perish and cause serious illness, not allowed. Totally off the books. So not even questionable. Some of the counties that have passed it include Will, Macon, McHenry, Madison, Carroll, Kendall, DeKalb. The county passes the ordinance, then once again, since I live in Bradley, once you guys accept it, I then have to approach Bradley to see if Bradley will accept it. Many of the cities within each state that have then passed this ordinance kind of put in their own stipulations requiring that home baker to have a sanitation license or to have that the food handler's license to make sure that they are properly preparing the cupcakes, buttercreams, any sort of fillings that might go into the cakes, any of the decoration, anything like that. They also ask that each person register with the state to make sure that you're staying within that $1,000 cap per month. That is then worked as a business, and so there's some kind of checks and balances system within you and the state and making sure you're staying within those regulations. Some of them also make sure that you register with the city. So the city knows, okay, these are our home bakers, these are the people working out of their home, this is what we know. It makes sure that you're accountable for what you're doing. If you're starting to do this out of your home, you're not doing it, you're not gonna say, hey, I'm gonna start baking today and let's make everybody try. Baking isn't for everyone, as we know. You can cook, you can sometimes bake, or you can bake, for sure. If someone is coming to you to make sure that they would like to order a cake or cupcakes, it's because number one, they've had your product and liked it. or they've been referred to somebody who has had your product, that has enjoyed it, and know that you can do a good job. Under the current laws within the state, I'm not allowed to sell this product from my home. I can donate my product, which I definitely do. I work with Icing Smiles, which is a nationwide company that provides cakes for the impacted family of critically ill children and their siblings. It's a very hard time for all families to go through, and we all know that a fun birthday cake or some cupcakes or cookies for a birthday party, bring a good smile to a kid's face or their siblings. I am able from my home to make those products, even if the child has a nut allergy or a gluten intolerance, anything like that. As long as I'm notified about it, the family's notified that the cake is baked in the home, that I'm aware of all allergies, I'm able to make a very super fun birthday cake for a child who's going through a really hard time. I can donate that without a problem. I can donate to Relay for Life, who has their walk here, Bishop Mack, every year. I've donated cupcakes for all the workers who donate their time so they can have a snack while they're working hard and supporting everyone in the community. I can donate to the Humane Society, which in turn can then raffle or sell my product to raise money to shelter the animals within Kankakee County. I've done all of this. I can do all of this out of my home. The one thing I cannot do, because we have not accepted it, is sell product out of my home. I 100% believe that it should be a consumer's choice. They know me. People who have contacted me about cakes know my product, know my cupcakes, know the specialty work that I do that can take hours, know that this isn't something that Jewel will do or that Kroger can do or that any place around that might be able to make something like so. They prefer me for a reason. If there is any sort of allergy, as I said, peanut or gluten or anything like that, I'm made aware of that, just like any store would be. I would have to follow guidelines accordingly. If I cannot do it, I have to tell the family no. I would never risk anybody making someone sick intentionally. That's never something anybody wants to do. You don't want to do that if you're cooking dinner for your family or you're having a graduation party and everybody's coming over. That's never an intentional aspect of anything. But when you're coming to baked goods, the illness that comes, or foodborne illness that can come out, it's minimal, absolutely minimal by the restrictions and guidelines of these baked goods that can be sold on a Saturday morning at a farmer's market or whenever the farmer's market is. The consumer choice for me is no different than if I want to go to a restaurant or a friend's house for dinner that night, or who I want to work on my car to fix my car. Am I going to take it to a shop or am I going to have my neighbor do it? You know, who prepares my taxes? Is it my friend that has an accounting degree but necessarily isn't an accountant? Or do I go somewhere and have it done? Who's going to do my home repairs, fix my water heater, you know? These sorts of things are all consumer choices, as should be where somebody wants to buy a birthday cake. Whether legal or not at the time, I do know that many of the bakeries within the area started as home-based businesses. Restaurant industry is the hardest industry to get into. They predict that you most likely will not make a profit within 5 years. Industry standard. It's a huge undertaking, financial responsibility, burden to do this. This is why many people start out of their home to build up a clientele, to save some money, so that someday they are able to do that. Or guess what? This allows those moms that are at home or who can make some cake pops or some cookies, who can make some extra cash for the family. They can start selling those kind of things. Somebody who wants to make the banana bread or the zucchini bread and sell it, they can do that. Guess what? Somebody loves that recipe. Or in all reality, the lost talent of like grandma's apple pie that you don't find very often. Maybe somebody wants to share that recipe and they can make a good profit with that. So they would like to do that. So I am asking for your help to allow these people to do so. This is a specialty niche for these people who work in the industry like that. We would love to be able to share our talents with people, and this is a good way to start that. I would like to continue and move this to a brick and mortar and to make this a full-time job for me so that it is something that a storefront where people can come and we don't have this issue. But I just ask for your help, and this would be the first step, you guys accepting the ordinance. Thank you very much. And by the way, I have samples. Your choice. I'll leave them over there on the table. Your choice if you would like to have one. Thank you.
How does that fall under the gift laws of, you know, I'm just curious. Because she had me a cupcake, I'm sorry. All right, moving on. Under presentations, I have none today. Approval of minutes, May 22nd. Need a motion to accept. Mr. McConnell, Mr. Washington, second. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carries. Nothing under appointments. Information services, Mr. Duval. Didn't see you back there. You were eclipsed by Mr. Snipes. Morning.
Okay, today I'm going to address what was brought up at the criminal justice meeting by the sheriff. The sheriff, if some of you don't know, the sheriff requested that that the computer rotation that they had be reinstated. They've had some updates to their software, and to be honest, they haven't been able to receive updated computers from me in, let's say, last year and a half. And the ones that they were getting before that were actually the ones that were allotted for this building that I was getting for him. So Trent put in a request for the sheriff to have additional computers or maybe start the rotation again. And the sheriff is, I believe, if I'm stating that properly, is requesting that the board consider reinstating the rotation of desktop computers. We're not addressing servers. This is the desktop computer rotation that we used to do years ago before the budget cuts arose. I talked to him after that meeting. I got some idea how much they were talking about and what they were going to need it for. After that, I talked briefly to the chairman and let him know that I would get him some numbers together. It's my feeling that I believe they're requesting to just ask in the future budgets that they be reinstated in the rotation. The amounts they're talking about are, honestly, I would request the same thing when the money is available. It's not a large amount, but if I understand them right, I believe they're just asking when you look at the budget amount that if it's possible that you can reinstate that. There are some changes that I would like to do potentially, and that's more address the structure of the county now than when we started the program. When we originally started the program, the county general fund was almost half of the size that we were now. So everything kind of went through my departments before the new jail existed. So part of my request would be, when you look at the future budget, to at least consider the current structure, maybe go directly to them for their segment and have the civil side or my side be separated. Don't have to do that. It's whatever you have available at the time that it happens. For me, I'm just talking about request. I mean, I've always understood, and as you know in this committee, you can only do what you can do. So it's based on what the numbers allow you to do at that time. What I plan on doing is submitting to and I've talked to Andy about this, submitting dollar amounts and give you several options, 3 or 4 options. Anything from doing a bulk purchase and then doing it every 4 years, or doing it every 3 years, every 4 years, and 5 years, which would be a lesser impact on that budget. If you do it 3, 4, 5, as you can guess, it'd be far less amount of money. You're just going to take longer to do it, but you also will never get past 4 years old of computers. Again, the current budget, as I've always stated since we've been here, is sufficient to do maintenance, and we're working fine. We're always in compliance. We're always up to a modern standard network. We do upgrade the operating systems. But at some point, your hardware gets past the point where you can't just keep doing that. I'm not saying we're at that stage, but they may be at that stage at this point. That's what they're requesting. I will have a plan for this building and those departments underneath the chairman or the boards, regardless, whichever way you go, we'll have a plan based on what the numbers. But since it was brought up, I need to submit something to the chairman that represents what the request for, and then that's your consideration of what you do. The current budget for my department is not at a level to do the rotation. And to be clear, I've always said that to you. We can do it in maintenance mode. The current level was not established by this current administration. It was cut several years ago, so it had nothing to do with the current chairman or even you. What we've just agreed to do is what every department was, is money didn't dictate doing anything different, so you work with what you have, and that's my philosophy. Crying about something that you don't have is for me, but it does seem like we're getting some of the changes, some of the things you've done, it looks like we're getting better. So I will put in recommendations for something to allow us to put the rotation, but I understand you first got not only dig out of the hole, you've got to do something about funds, repay what we do. Yes, we're having positive cash flow. I come from the business sector, so I gotta be careful what terms I use because they're not really applicable there, but there's other holes that you have to dig. So I take that into account, but the sheriff did bring it up. He's accurate at, they have not been able to get new computers in the last few years. They're doing the same thing we do as maintenance mode. What I've done is, as I've told this committee before, is I purchased refurbished, which will work. The numbers that when I talked to the sheriff, which he referred me to Trent, and I deal with Trent all the time, they're actually not asking to have everything the newest or whatever. They're just asking for something to get back into a rotation so they can have computers. The amounts that Trent said to me, I actually thought he was going to ask for more per item, so it was a reasonable request. That being said, I believe they said they understood that it's still going by what money you have to allot. So I don't know if you have any additional questions on that, but I just wanted to let you know I'm addressing what the sheriff said. I talked to him after meeting. I talked to Trent. I've talked to Andy. And I will submit some figures that become baselines for when I assume the chairman, the finance committee, whatever group gets together to look at what budgets allow. The only difference to that project, that process, I would say, is maybe consider going forward when you do allot something for sheriff to, we're not talking about going itemized because I believe in the bottom line budget too, is to maybe separate that figure out. This is amount for this, and this is what we specifically allocate for hardware when you have the money available. So it's clear that's what it was for. You can still go to me, but at that point, I still would need to say, this is how much is for this. This is how much for those civil departments. None of this includes the the offices elected that have computer funds. We've already been rotating with them. We work out programs, and they're not an issue. These are the ones that don't have computer funds that by state or federal.
I have one, I guess, more of a statement than a question for the pretty much since I took the chair or put the bullseye on, as I like to say. The judges have been asking for new computers because they're running very slow with their system. Now we've debated whether that's because of the system or the operating system of the computers. Do we need to do more of I'm sure you have a list of the operating systems of all the machines and some type of an inventory. Do we need to prioritize these, not just necessarily by the sheriff's department, by all departments?
That doesn't apply to this. They have their own funds.
Judges do.
Yes, they could do it at any time they wanted to.
Okay.
Unless they're going to change the process, which I don't dictate.
Okay.
In the past, the circuit clerk's funds have always paid for the judge's computers.
Okay. All right.
So, and at least the one judge who actually did complain about has a new computer in both her chambers and at her bench. And honestly, it's the fastest computer throughout the whole county. So they didn't skimp, or I didn't skimp when they put in the request, and she's been very happy with that. The rest of them didn't request it.
So again,
They have the funds. It's not something you would have to.
All right. So I didn't realize that they would tap into the circuit clerk's automation.
That's how it was done in the past. The last 3, I would say, rotations, they paid for it. It's up to them. You can do it something different, but that money was there. And since I believe in the past, I don't know if this is accurate, but the circuit clerk is the clerk of the courts. Their funds are there not just for their office, but to maintain the records for the judicial office. So there was perfect reason. And when we looked in the past throughout the state, that's how a lot of them were doing. And I believe they still have line items too, maybe specifically for computer related things in judicial, even though they're separate departments. But anytime they want to, they can. They just haven't requested. There are some offices that want computers. A lot of them, you wouldn't believe this, don't like having new computers. A lot of times it's me that's dictating something that needs to happen, maintenance and all that, because all they know is you're going to stick something new in front of them that changes their workflow, and that's the last thing they're looking for in the day. We've had budget constraints. They've not been able to get raises, although recently that's been rectified. So the last thing they want to say, all they know is they get a new computer, they got more work to do. So it's not a hard push from, I would say the majority of them haven't actually asked for that. And security, this doesn't address security. We always have the security mechanism in place. As I've discussed this committee over the last 1.5 years, we already have a plan that will make sure every desktop is Windows 10 by the date that it needs to be. That's already in place. But that was going to be, at least for my department, a combination of refurbished machines and those machines that will work if I put the new operating systems to keep them in play. What the sheriff is doing is, that's a different system. They have different requirements than we do. And the way we do it, both in the sheriff's department and here, is it's by the specific task that person is needed to do and the software it's run. We don't just go say, here's a base computer, everybody needs to have that. We address what that person's doing so we don't over purchase for something. We could just come back and say, everybody needs to be this one and I need 1,500 per. We don't do that. If that task can be done with a $500 machine or 400, we'll do that. If that allows the money to be left over for those people that need a $1,500 one because they do a specific report writing task. So it's not just willy-nilly. We look at the task, and we have a lot of experience to look at it that way. The other thing is, as far as I understand, and the sheriff could speak to this more if there is a question, none of these figures that I've talked with Trent address the laptops that go in the squad cars. I believe that's addressed when the squad cars, that's part of the setup when they purchase the squad cars. That's not something in the past we ever did. While they've changed what they put in the squad cars, those machines are quite a bit more than even a powerful desktop. We may spend anywhere from $500 to $700 on a desktop. When we first started this program 18, 19 years ago, that was $4 or $5 grand per squad car. I don't believe they're anywhere near that, but you got to remember, that's not a controlled environment. The temperatures in a squad car can go from 100 something down to below freezing. The car's moving all the time. Computers are not designed to be bouncing up and down. So you can't just populate that with the laptop that you put in your house. Those are specific for the tasks that a police car does. So I believe that's the way that's happening. Regardless, that's not what I'm addressing. And I'm also not addressing servers. Servers are done when the contracts are renewed. That contract will dictate what hardware that software needs to run on at that time. So when a project is presented to you from the department, that figure will be in there. That's also a reasonable request. That's a good way to control costs because you're not over purchasing, you're not rotating it to just rotate. You're dealing with the project as it arises. And actually, when you do that contract, it's going to be the bigger part will be the software. The hardware will be almost nothing compared to that contract. So if you have any other questions, I'm just addressing what the sheriff brought up. Hopefully that satisfies what you needed.
Mr. Vickery?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is the sheriff's department standalone? I mean, are you involved in the sheriff's department?
We are, but you got to understand how we are. We work closely with Trent and Josh. We're in charge of this building, and we're in charge of the courthouse and the annex, which is the biggest systems that there are. The next biggest system is the sheriff's, and they have their own system. These two systems have to both operate together, but they also have to operate separately legally. So we make sure that those things that need to communicate are those things that need to be communicated, and then those things that don't aren't. As it is, and I've explained this with past boards, what we're doing is efficient for you as a board, so you don't have to do what some of the counties our size or larger has to do, which is develop an IT staff per large department. You can't afford that, but that's what exists in Will County, DuPage County, and all that. But we can't go that next step. My department already controls the circuit clerk's computers, the judicial's computers, the prosecutor's computers, the public defender's computers. We can't then also control the sheriff's computers. You've now crossed the line. You can't have a tech person that can access and control all that data. That's not something you should ever even consider doing at that point. We're stretching it as it is. The fact that in the court process, we control the data through everything other than the sheriff. That's really pressing it. I don't know if that answers your question.
So the
But
sheriff
we
has
do
his own-
interoperate every day. If not
Sure.
every day, every other day, we talk about something and say, all right, we're allowing this happen, this is happening. We have cameras here in this building that route back to the sheriff's system. We have some in the annex that route from our network back to theirs. They need to have their system access come through and access to the state's attorney's office and the prosecutor office. They have some that have to go there. They need to be controlled. So that's how that works.
So they primarily control their system.
Now, yeah, 100% they control their system.
So your responsibilities are only to make sure it integrates in certain levels.
We control the judicial system, court. And that's the base of it. I don't want to overstate, you only arrest somebody so you can get them to the court system. The court system is the key to everything for us, for the general public. For the law enforcement, that's not the case. They have 911, although we deal with the desktops 911. 911 uses New World. I don't want to overstate this. The sheriff's system not only is the sheriff's system, I think it's unless things have changed, Sheriff, you would know better than me, it's the primary law enforcement system throughout all of the county. Unless things have changed, I believe the city of Kankakee, Bourbonnais, Bradley, everybody uses or is connected to their New World system. So it's major. It's a key hub that everything runs through there. But we do the court system. There are more machines that are not part of the sheriff's department than are, but that's significant what they do.
Your budget numbers are about 1/3 of what they were several years ago, right, Kevin?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
When these plans and the rotation, everything, you were here. Actually, you were here when this department was reformed from a data processing. They asked me to come in and take over and take it from an old system to a modern system. Hopefully I don't get these numbers wrong. We were in the high 3s, under 4. We're now 155. Well, we can maintain, but you can't do what you did before at the figures that we have. But we also understand your budget amounts aren't there. So we work with what we give you, and we give you something that'll allow you to work and it'll perform. Understand, there is no one, at least on our side, that is not performing the job. There's nothing that's hindering them. And I believe the sheriff is saying the same thing. They're just saying now as things go out, it's becoming not feasible for them on their side to just do a maintenance mode. You know, they've replaced all the hard drives and all the power supplies that they can do. And now too many things are going wrong with that. I believe that's what that request was.
Based on the
Some of the questions you'd have to ask the sheriffs because
based on the budget, you did a good job last year. You're within $100 of your budget forecast.
and I appreciate that you say that. But I don't want it to ever be confused that this is the amount that I want to have. I'm saying this
Finance
is what
committee is
we
tomorrow, and we're doing budgets next month. Just for clarity.
Thank you.
Mr. Snipes?
Mr. Duval, I think you do an exceptional job for what you do, up under the budget constraints that you do, and what you have. Your job is a unique job in that though the hardware in some cases, like the computers or CPUs have come down, the software has not come down at that same rate, and in many cases have escalated. So it looks like you have to balance the two. What's amazing to me is that I have a Dell that I like, but after Windows XP, it couldn't be upgraded. Anything. It's a great computer and it's sitting there, whatever, but it could not be upgraded to a Windows 7 or 10. And then there's nothing out there for XP. So it made me have to go and buy another computer. And somehow you are able to make a lot of these things work. And so therefore, I'm assuming that your foresight is, looking into the future as to maintaining and getting the best bang for the buck, and even then some out of it. If you were to, or have you at any time gotten any type of what I call dream proposal as to automating the system to where it needs to be and the costs associated with that, dealing with both the intercommunication and the independent communication in the county?
Well, first of all, I'll thank you for what you said. Is what I do specifically is I address every contract in every department and whatever software they're running in that department. In those contracts, they have the specs and they say what the hardware requirements are. I make sure we don't hit the minimum one, we exceed that. So when you hear a figure from me, that's taking account that we should get superior performance from the contract they dictate. That's also taking account, it's Microsoft. They're going to say that, well, they tell you from the time that their operating system comes out, they say when that you have to switch over that we're not going to maintain security. So I take into account the fact that at some point we're going to have to upgrade that budgets may be tight. We may not be able to rotate hardware. So I need to make sure I have a machine that will be able to potentially run that new version of it. So I take that. It's not just we purchase something and hope for the good. I actually sit down, we test on machines and we see what we can do. So, and I mean, I've been doing this, I've been working for the county almost 20 years and I dealt with this prior to that. So there is a plan in effect. We know where we're going with that. The second part of your question is, it's a little, I'm not exactly sure how I would address this because we have everything at the county that you need, but that's not what addressing what you want to go in the future. Nobody is lacking for anything. What we're addressing, I believe what the sheriff is addressing is the future needs are coming in at, we stretched this hardware as far as we're going. You ask, well, how far can you go? I think the sheriff's saying you've hit that stage. We're almost there, but we're not quite there. and I've developed a plan to do it either way. I always have a plan, worst case scenario, more likely scenario. I have the best case. I've never submit that to you because that's just, we're never going to be in that situation where you're just flowing in the money. We were lucky. When I first came here, it was tight. We had about an 8-year period that we were flowing in the money, and then we're back to being tight. So when I came here, we were tight. You would know that. Majority of the county's expenses at the time, it's been tight financially. So I don't base on anything on something that may happen. I base on reality and kind of worst case scenario, but you're always secure. You're always exceeding the baseline. Am I addressing what you're saying? We could go even more. It's not necessarily better. It's just more, maybe more efficient. But what I don't want to do is say, hey, you know what? We need to have $1,500 per workstation. And then it sits there the majority of the time and it's not utilizing what they're there because there's so many more machines, or there's maybe bodies you could be paying for that you need to have. I want to make sure that people aren't being laid off because we have overpriced machines sitting on a desktop because it's one pool of money that things are coming from.
Makes sense.
Anyone have anything else? Do you have anything else, Kevin?
Nope.
That's it. All right. Thank you so much. Moving on, Health Department, Mr. Beavis.
Good morning.
Morning.
I just had one brief thing that I wanted to update you on in regards to summer's in full swing here. So the environmental health, the vector program has been setting the traps for the mosquitoes and collecting the mosquitoes and the larvae and getting those tested. We did we had a positive pool for mosquitoes. That was around July 13th for one of the locations in the county. So we did send a press release out. We put it out on our Facebook, just, educating the public again, reiterating the fact that we know that we have West Nile present here typically every year. We do not have any positive human cases yet, and we hope not to, but the summer has been playing out to kind of be hot and dry for periods of time, which is conducive to the breeding of that Culex mosquito. So we're just still encouraging people to follow the 3 R's, which is reduce, repel, or report. Obviously, reduce the amount of water that you might have standing on your property, bird baths, cans, tires, things like that. Keep your grasses and weeds cut down so that eliminates potential areas for them to grow. Repel by using the repellents when you're out and about in the evenings or in the mornings if you have to be outside. And then obviously report any nuisance complaints. If you have a neighbor, for example, that would have a stagnant swimming pool that they're not using and it's looking pretty dark and green and brown and not doing anything with it, that could be growing larvae, so that would want to be treated. We can investigate that and then try to get that taken care of. Also, if you're seeing any dead birds or anything, you can contact the health department, and if it qualifies, we will send that off to the state laboratory for testing. I think we've sent off a couple, so we get about 15 a year that we can send off. We've not had any positive hits there yet either. There was in June, we did receive notification from the state that there was a positive human, but that was in Chicago, in the Chicago area. But just remember, we did have the 2 human cases last year in Kankakee County. So it is possible, but we're hoping with the education, it appears from what I see and read on our Facebook page and our website, there's a lot more people paying attention because of what happened with us last year. So that's a good thing as a result of that, that's coming out of that, the people are paying attention. So that's all I had for today.
Any questions? Mr. Tripp.
On that particular thing, I just wonder if you had any comments on the cupcake law.
I am, like what? We have been communicating, I have been communicating with Brooke in relation to this about, I don't know, less than a month ago, I think she contacted me and talked to me. We are aware of that. We're working with her in relation to what we currently can do with her, or another individual like her that would want to do something like that. So I did make some notes here. Currently, within the state food guidelines, there is the cottage food rules that allows an individual such as what she's describing. So somebody, you could set up and sell baked goods out of your home. You could make baked goods out of your home under the cottage food rule, but only be able to sell them at a farmer's market. So at Kankakee on Saturday, or Moments whenever they have theirs, Mantino. You would have to make arrangements with that farmer's market to be able to sell that food only there. Again, you cannot sell it out of your home as a business. The cupcake law was passed a few years ago. It states about, that the county would have to pass that. My opinion,
That's what I want.
I have concerns. I'm not going to say I'm definitely against it or wouldn't be for it. If the ordinance were passed, the health department would definitely then need to move forward and work with that the best way possible. So as I was describing earlier, the foot in the door for one individual, then the door's opened and maybe there's 50 individuals. So the rule does not allow the health departments to license them as we would a restaurant. So we don't have the ability to collect a fee, which then allows us to go in and do inspections 1, 2, or 3 times a year. It does allow us to investigate a complaint or a suspect foodborne outbreak that would occur. I understand, I've been in this business for 31 years. I can't recall too many situations, hardly, that a foodborne outbreak was attributed to a chocolate chip cookie or a piece of bread or a cupcake, I guess. That doesn't mean it could not happen. I mean, we're dealing with outbreaks right now that are occurring all over the state and the United States in relation to people eating salads, from a restaurant that is licensed. So cross-contamination can happen. Cross-contamination can happen in a home where foods are made that we would not have oversight over. So in relation to my opinion, I have concerns, but ultimately there's a number of rules or regulations that I may not like, but if that's the law, then we enforce it and we'll do it. And then there may be a number that I agree with that you might not, but ultimately a rule or a legislation or a law is a law, and we would have to comply with that. So if the county were to adopt and pass this, and in this situation, this individual were to work with their village and get it done, or through the county, if they're not within a village, then it would be through the county that they'd have to, possibly register, then we can try to work with, I guess, the state's attorney to determine if there's anything we could add. We can look into what these other counties did or have in their rules and regulations that could help us at least respond to a situation, or as she suggested, requiring that the individuals be food certified, taking the food class so that they're aware of the issues. All the restaurants are going to have to be complying going into next year, or starting this year already, with the allergen, notification, so that, when you go into a restaurant, if you're allergic to peanuts or something like that, you need to be making your waitress or your waiter or the management aware of that situation, so that, somebody doesn't get sick or have some sort of an episode, and then they have to have people trained on site. So hopefully that is something that, could trickle down to somebody who then potentially is going to be, as we move forward, and if this were to pass tomorrow, for example, that it's kind of an unfunded mandate, because we're not going to be able to collect any money or license any of these facilities, and only be able to inspect them upon a complaint, which just creates more work.
But if I could, Mr. Tripp, we're getting kind of ahead of it a little bit, but I'm glad you asked the question. It may save him from staying till the end if he doesn't want to. But the thought is to, since we don't have an ordinance in front of us, if the committee likes the idea, we would go to the state's attorney to draft the ordinance and bring back and maybe put under the health department's agenda item for the next committee meeting. Now, that's, that was my thought process. We're just kind of getting ahead of that right now. Because I was unaware that we couldn't license here locally. I don't know all the ins and the outs. I didn't know if the state law. We need to vet those things. Mr. Byrne, I guess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm the one who brought the cupcake ordinance to the committee. The ordinance was adopted, like Mrs. Love said, in 2014, and we spoke before the meeting about finding a middle ground of oversight where there might be a small fee to enable the health department to have some oversight on these home-based bakeries. And that's a discussion offline for the health department, state's attorney's office, and any other person that pertinent to this issue. And then the hopes is that we come before the executive committee a month from now with an ordinance in place through the state law, using the state law as our template. But if we have to, add some concerns that the health department might have, and also not putting so much of a government burden on the person at home. I mean, quite honestly, I didn't know a cupcake law existed until about a week and a half ago, and it's sort of interesting the role of government on are we dictating to what people can do in their homes. I mean, it's a fine line, and I think there needs to be a discussion between the health department, state's attorney's office, and figure out a way that we can make it work and enable somebody who is starting out as a small one-person little operation, making under $1,000 a month, to perhaps be a brick and mortar business a year or two from now and be a tax-paying business and employer.
And in actuality, I guess, as you look at it from the baby steps of growth, with the cottage food rule, it's a similar type setup in relation to a homeowner is allowed to make food out of their home. Certain kinds of food, the non-potentially hazardous foods. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they can't be grilling hamburgers and turkey burgers and things like that. It's basically bakery items that would comply with the rules and regulations. So the cottage food industry is already taking place, and one of the requirements is then, if it were you, for example, you're required to register with the health department in which the county you reside. Mm-hmm. So we have individuals who come from Iroquois County, so they're registered in Iroquois County, and so when we're at the farmer's market doing our inspections on a Saturday morning and we approach your booth and we're like, well, who are you? We don't recognize you, we didn't know you were here, and you're like, you pull out your paperwork to show you are a registered cottage food industry individual, and then we are like, okay, thank you very much. Now we can look and just make maybe some recommendations. You don't have hand washing set up, you're going to want to do that and do something like that. But I can't require you to get a license like I would the other individuals. This cupcake law is sort of that next step then, that if that's allowed for a farmer's market situation, then we're growing to a situation where an individual that maybe hasn't grown large enough to either rent space from a restaurant or attempt to open up a restaurant or convert a second kitchen within their home to be a restaurant. Because if you are a business out of your home licensed with the health department, you'd have to have a separate kitchen in and of itself. You're not allowed to use your home kitchen. This allows you to use your home kitchen with all the things that happen within your home, that we have no control over.
And perhaps over the next month or so, we can craft a ordinance that will satisfy the health department's concerns, along with not putting too much of a burden on the homeowner or the home baked person.
And just, I'm not going to speak necessarily for Dell, but I know he and I were having a conversation that just another caveat to think about in relation, because it's out of my purview, is the zoning issue in relation to a business in a home. I mean, if this becomes a business out of a home, does that then impact the zoning issues in relation to a Bradley, a Bourbonnais, a Kankakee, or the county of? Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Just one more comment, and
sure.
It's all leading to this part, what reason I asked the question, is that you are going to be involved, you're going to have your people involved. I'm looking at the budget end of it. Do we need to have more people cover what he needs to cover? It's going to take more money, and that's the issue, I think, that more. I'm not against it at all, I just think about the budget end of it. But if he has to do this or that, or his department does, what's it gonna lead to as far as budget goes? Need more people to do more inspections? That's where I'm coming from.
I think it's a worthwhile, at least thought and
Just
conversation.
to look at it.
And let me ask you this, as a committee, do we want to amend the agenda to move the discussion of the cupcake ordinance to now, since we've been talking about it already?
Oh,
So moved. Second, Mr. Byrne, all those in favor of amending? Those
sorry
against?
That's all right.
Okay, now let's move into that discussion since we've got all this going on here. Let me go to Mr. Snipes first.
I was educated upon this cottage law that you stated that you can cook in the home, sell it at the farmer's market. And there's nothing as far as restrictions placed upon the individual from home to the farmer's market by the health department or the state law or whatever. But when I listen to the same individual say, I'm going to make the cupcake, but I just want to keep it at the house and sell it out, then the laws kick in and a lot of other things come in and kind of frustrate and look at the budget and the whole 9 yards. But what concerns me is what is the difference between this and when the church has a potluck or when they have those church sales or whether that tends to fall under the radar, or if you had a lemonade stand and then someone that was diabetic says, oh, I just had a diabetic reaction or whatever. I mean, I'm trying to gauge. I do know that laws kick in, but I also know that there's exceptions to the rules and how those rules will probably be implemented, because we don't have a lot of individuals running to you talking about, I got some bad lemonade, or I was at the church and I got sick, but the possibility is there. And do we burden the issue of just a gentle cupcake with no custard, you know, and for the delight, do we burden them with all the rules or whatever? Because I'm thinking if we do an ordinance, we certainly want to bring in the health department to probably help set those guidelines, because every county probably would have the individual, you know, whatever their concerns are addressed before they, you know, put that ordinance out. So certainly we would have conversation with you as far as that, and maybe can implement things so that the process can run smoother. But what stops us, because it doesn't look like the lemonade stand or the bake sales at the church follows the cottage rules.
The current county health department food ordinance has a number of categories for licensing within it. So obviously your restaurants are required to have a license, and they fall under a high, medium, low category. Your grocery stores, your retails, your 7-Elevens, your convenient marts, your liquor stores, if they sell milk or any kind of potentially hazardous foods, hospitals, cafeterias, schools, those are all required to have a license. Hold on, I'm getting there. Under some circumstances, there are waivers in relation to a fee. So you might be required, a school, like an elementary school, is required to have a license with the health department and receive the inspections just as anyone else would. However, they don't have to pay for a fee. That, when the ordinance was created, they're exempt from having to pay because they're a non-for-profit organization. All right, so that's for food service on a daily basis, basically. A temporary food license is required when you go down to this coming weekend, for example. It's going to be the Music Fest, and you're going to see a number of food vendors set up: cream of the crop, the ice cream people, the donuts, just hamburgers, smoked barbecue, all that kind of stuff, the pizza. They get licenses for temporary food events through the health department. Some of them go almost every weekend throughout the course of the summer. They might operate 30 to 50 times over the course of a year in the community. Some just come in for a one-time, one-and-done kind of a thing. They come in for the county fair, the Bourbonnais Friendship Festival. They're from out of state. They get a license for, you know, we have different categories. So different licenses that they pay. So theoretically, then, going to your first part of that question on the churches, churches are required to get temporary food events for their potluck dinners, for their bake sales, for their chili suppers, for whatever they're doing. Whether they sell, ask for a donation, or are giving the food away, it matters not to me. It's food that's being served to the public, and therefore we're looking for the safety of the public as well as helping protect the organization that's doing the event, that they're doing it safely. So the churches are allowed to, not like the schools, they don't have to pay for their license. It's under certain conditions, and that's they don't do it more than once a week, more than 3 days in a row, or 12 times annually. So if you have 12 pancake breakfasts once a month at a church, you get 12 inspections, potentially, if you're operating well enough. We maybe just spot check you. But if you hit 13, 14, 15 or more events, you fall out of that non-for-profit and you have to pay for your license. So we work with the churches. Now, the second part of that, when you described a situation, sometimes they fly under the radar. If they neglect to contact us and we don't see it in the newspaper or on Facebook, they get missed. But, you know, if we see them, we will go out and educate them and get them licensed.
If I could no more board members please leave? We need a quorum, and now we're at the minimum for a quorum. So I'm asking nicely, please don't leave, because we have some important things to vote on. And I will say that we're getting way into the weeds on this, on things that are not germane to the issue at hand. And so if we could, can we at least get some kind of a motion to move this forward to the state's attorney to talk with Dell and with the health department to bring something back here that fits within what we're trying to accomplish? Mr. Burton, you make the motion? In whatever way that makes sense is what I just said. Okay.
Make the motion that the state's attorney, health department, planning department, zoning department, sit down over the next month, draft the local ordinance using the state law on the books already as a template, come before the executive committee next month to look over and either adopt or not adopt the county update law.
Second? Okay, and are you gonna be the Cupcake chairman?
I will be
Okay, Jimmy Sprinkles, I like that. All right. That was Mr. Tripp. Sorry, that was fantastic, Jim. I love that. Is there any more questions?
I would say this, question. And that's before we got into the cupcake little thing, was that most churches don't know this. So now that they had this up on a because I wouldn't have known it or whatever. So therefore, that information is vital because we're dealing with the health department issues. So as a result, when you brought that up, that's what gave me my concern about the lemonade stands or the potluck dinners or things at church. And a lot of them don't know that information. And I believe now.
I respectfully disagree. I feel that a number of them do over the course of the 31 years now that the health department's been in existence. Early on, it was a struggle, but I feel that most of the bigger churches that do this, we've licensed in some form or fashion in regards to that. What happens is the main issue, I guess, is that each cycle of new individuals who take over for a particular church in relation to running a particular event might not necessarily get handed down the information that, hey, here's this great binder that tells you everything to do, and you need to call the health department. You know, it's just like, hey, would you take over and do it? Because the other person just passed away and we need somebody. And then, you know, you put the advertisement in the newspaper and we see it. And then we're like, we didn't get called this weekend, so let's go out there and we educate them. So it's not our goal to go in and shut people down. It's to make them have a good, safe event.
All right. And that's why I said the education part of it is great, because I played for a lot of them and only heard like one of them talk about ever having to be licensed. So I think the good information is, so they can pick it up from the podcast, that it is something that needs to be considered when they're about to do a potluck or whatever.
All right, thank you. Mr. Washington, did you have something to add before we move on?
Yes. I've been married for over 50 years, and the time prior to our ceremony, my wife hired a lady who baked a triple layer wedding cake out of her home. And that, to me, has been part of the makeup of this community for all these years. This is brand new to me, knowing about the cupcake law, but people have done this for quite some time. They've been doing it, whether they knew they were breaking the law, or whether there was any law to govern them. This has been in existence for some time.
Thank you. Thank you. That's important to note is icing on the cake. Thank you. Two shows. No, sorry. So moving on, and thank you, Mr. Beavis. Appreciate it. Thanks. Scones, yeah. Moving on to schools, we have a quarterly report in your packet. Need a motion to put it on file. Mr. Vickery, second. Ms. Weber? Okay. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carries. The VAC monthly report, we don't have anyone here to report, but they have a monthly report. I need a motion to approve the VAC report. Mr. Washington, second. Mr. Vickery, all those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carries. County Administrator's report. Anita Speckman. Not appropriate yet. Yeah, we don't need that yet.
Good morning. You do all have the staffing report in front of you. And it is, I just did a roll forward of the last 60 days since we didn't have an executive committee last year. The numbers for the current month hires and termination is really the last 2 months of activity. And if you look in there, I think as an overview, really you don't see a whole lot of increases or decreases other than in the Sheriff's Department, we have the part-time people. We had 7 added this month, and actually it's not reflected in the last one, but last month was 4. So we're up to 11 part-time. And in speaking with the sheriff, really that's been part of an ongoing move to add part-time people, both to cut down on, reduce the overtime numbers in the Sheriff's Department or in the Corrections Department, but then also if he's got somebody that leaves, he's got a part-timer there that could step in, be already trained, et cetera, for that position. But you'll see that. I did take a look at total headcount numbers. The oldest report I could find in my office was January, which had the December numbers. Total overall headcount is up 2. So pretty consistent with where it's been. Overall headcount, not up a lot. Any questions on that?
Mr. Vickery.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I recall the state's attorney adding a position of 17, but I see his total count is 32. 32 in the state's attorney's department.
Is that, I would imagine that includes all the clerical staff and everybody else. It's just he's limited on attorneys.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
I just wanted clarification on that.
Right.
That's all. Okay. Thank you.
All right, so moving on, no other questions. Oh, Mr. Snipes.
Yes. Just to get a point of clarification, you have the sheriff current staff or sheriff deputies at 40, but then there's a little thing to the side that says they're at 44.
Right. It's the other 2 lines above that, the lieutenants and the chief are actually deputies. So if you add those 3 lines together, the 3 and the 1 and the 40 road deputies, or I'm not going to say the words right, but if you add them together, that's the 44.
Okay, so you're just putting them
And
together.
that's consistent with the way
40,
this was reported in the past. So if you'd like to see it different or that taken out, if it's misleading, happy to make any changes that make it easy for you to understand.
No, I just thought that, I know he was requesting 4, so I thought he got the 4 that he was requesting, but that's not the case. It's, you're adding in something.
Right.
Or whatever. Okay.
Right. Okay. The other thing, I've spent quite a bit of time the last several days looking at our travel policy and our resolution. And there is something I ran across in the resolution I would hope to address here. And if the resolution is in your packet, and if you look under section 2, official business for which expenses may be reimbursed,
See where we're at
it's
here.
at the bottom of page 1 of the resolution. Our resolution indicates that what we reimburse is,
Next page, Jim. Next page.
yeah, that one at the bottom.
Section 2.
An official of the county shall be entitled to reimbursement for travel, including meals or lodging related to the following types of official business: education conferences related to the duties of the officer, and site visits to the current or potential vendors of the county. And if you turn the page, an employee shall be entitled to reimbursement for travel, including meals and lodging related to the following types of official business: education conferences, and site visit to current or potential vendors. What is missing is business-related expenses as approved by a department head. And I'll give you some examples that currently occur that are not reflected in the resolution. Transportation meetings in Livingston County. Andy went to several Indiana flood meetings. That wouldn't be included. Last week, Andy asked me to attend a meeting in Forest related to flooding and coordination of Iroquois County and Kankakee County. That's neither one of these, so that would not be included. My mileage wouldn't be reimbursed for that. I did attend with Tom Latham a meeting on the Will County Juvenile Detention Center. Now, luckily, I hitched a ride with him in a county vehicle, but under these criteria, that would not have been reimbursed. Board members that go to the Regional Office of Education meetings in Iroquois County wouldn't fall into either of these. So I'm asking that that be considered to amend the resolution to include those types of activities.
Do I have a motion? Mr. Burns, second, Mr. Washington. Any questions on that? Thoughts, considerations? I guess that fall under voice vote. All those in favor? Those opposed? Wait a minute. It could be we're spending money at some points. Let's do a roll call just in case. Yeah, that's a good point.
Mr. Tripp?
Aye.
Mr. Washington? Mr. Vickery? Mr. Snipes? Mr. Byrne?
Aye.
Ms. Weber? Mr. Wheeler?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you.
The only other thing that I wanted to mention, tomorrow there'll be discussion in the Finance Committee about some specific travel reimbursement requests. I'm not prepared to go into any of that. The one thing I did want to note that when I'm going through this, either in our ordinance or in our policy, do we say that we reimburse 75% of expenses the day of travel? It is something that's being done in practice, but it's not in our ordinance, it's in our resolution, it's not in our policy. So overall, I would say this. I talked to Andy several times over the last few days. As we look at all our policies, we need to put some work on this travel policy and put some more wording to clarify the expenses, what we pay, what the amounts are, so that it's fair to our employees before they leave what they're going to get reimbursed for, rather than after they return and some of their expenses are not allowed. So I think rather than go into one policy, we're going to be looking at all our policies, so I guess forewarned.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's why we included this here, because this will come up tomorrow. If there's anybody that's here that's on finance, you'll understand some of the background of that. You know, things like business-related expenses as approved by the department head under the procedure part that's in our employee handbook that allow department heads to approve expenses. Those types of things exist in our policies, and there is some things that need to be cleaned up between the ordinance that's on file, the way it's being misapplied in some cases and correctly applied in others, and then in the cases that we're talking about, like right now, we had to fix, you know, an employee that if I send someone to the regional office of education is doing county business and we're not reimbursing that mileage, well, technically we don't have that authority. You just allow that to happen. So little tweaks, little things. Anita's also going through the whole policy and procedure handbook with our liability insurance carrier. They're providing an assessment. They might have just a few suggestions because we haven't done that in ever. I don't think so. We're trying to do things the right way, looking at the way we're lining up our ordinances with what's in the handbook. That makes sense. Okay.
Good. Anything else? Any questions for me?
Thank you. Moving on. Administrative issues have nothing under there except for one opening on the Kankakee County Board of Health. That's a county board member. Once again, let me know if you want to serve in that capacity. 2 openings on the Regional Planning Commission, 1 on the Manteno Drainage District number 3, 1 on the Manteno number 9 Drainage District, 1 opening on the Wilcan Regional Development Authority, 2 openings on the Essex Township Fire Protection District, and 1 opening on the Ethics Commission. And that would be somebody who is a non-Republican, independent, libertarian, pescatarian, sorry, vegetarian, there you go. On other business, we had some things since we canceled a meeting because nothing on the agenda beyond these. Can I get a motion to combine and approve the county clerk's monthly report for 2018, the assessor's monthly report for June 2018, and the recorder's monthly report for June of 2018? Motion to combine and approve, Mr. Tripp. Second, Mr. Byrne. Let's see here. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Final piece of business. And this is something that I was bringing to the executive committee. And it's the reason this has kind of been every time. Wait a minute. Oh, I'm sorry. Flowers and memorials. I'm skipping that one. Sorry about that. I apologize. I was waiting. I was like, no, wait a minute. We have something else. This situation obviously came up. I first heard about it from a watchdog group out of Southern Illinois that has all of Illinois as their turf, if you will, objecting to the fact that we were using taxpayer money on flowers for board members and the board members' immediate relatives, but also the fact that that other departments. They assumed it was only administration, and it was many departments were sending flowers. For some reason, they only focused on the county board, which seems to be the case for most people. But a lot of departments actually were sending flowers, frankly, a lot more than we were. So the question that I'm putting to you is, and that's why I put in what our policy was, the one that was updated pending approval. We didn't show that it was ever approved anywhere. We're digging through the dusty files, and you know, we basically had an understanding of what it was, and I'm throwing it to the board. Do you want to continue this policy to allow it just for administration departments? Because as we know, other elected department heads can do what they will. We can have a policy against it, and that they can still, they're statutorily, they can spend the lump sum that we give them any way that they choose. What we choose is how much we give them next year. So that's kind of where our involvement comes in. So I'll just throw that to the committee for any discussion that you have. Should we have an amount? Should we not have an amount? Should we have no policy whatsoever and not allow it for administration? That's where I'm at. So, Mr. Byrne?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't see a problem with this. In the private sector, businesses do it. If an employee lost a loved one, if there's a cap we can put on it to make it a minimal expense, but I don't see why we shouldn't. If someone, you know, is going through a hard time, to express ourselves to them if we need to. And it may be limited to, you know, immediate family. You know, where does it end?
That's kind of where it's at. It's already at immediate.
Yeah,
you know,
and I think it's appropriate that we have something like that.
Mr. Tripp first.
Another board member and I have coffee with a bunch of people, and they just threw that out there. What do you think we should do? And they all said, "Just don't do it."
Don't do it.
Don't do it. I don't. have any problem with it either way. But just listening to them, 8 or 10 of them,
So they're saying don't spend our tax money on
yeah,
flowers.
yes.
Okay,
I was kind of surprised in a way.
sure. Mr. Snipes?
With me, I guess because it was brought up to me because they got a question of as far as these expenditures was concerned, and he was following a policy that we didn't have policy, or that the policy didn't expand to approving of a flower being sent in certain circumstances, or at least identifying who a family member and an employee is. For deaths, I believe that we need to. I think that's just, if I'm here or we've done it in the past, whether it's employee of the county or county board, period, I think that needs to be done. Where I have the problem with is, while it's plausible to say, welcome with the new baby, I don't think we need to be saying anything for a baby or whatever as far as that's concerned. I think, it's probably, we can do that personally if we like, but I'm thinking the thing now, I'm trying to distinguish what is the difference between death and memorial. Is it, are we sending to a memorial fund in the on behalf of the board to whatever memorial that this person is? I think in that case, I would probably say not. I will probably send the flower, or unless they say and or whatever. If the person says in lieu of flowers, send it to the memorial, then I can go with that, in the honor. But
To answer your question, just specifically, sometimes they say in lieu of flowers, send a memorial to the American Cancer Society.
right, or something like
So
that.
that's when that would
pop in.
typically
That's
have
what I
done
was
it.
saying.
That's-
In lieu of one or the other,
Mhm.
I think that would be okay as far as that's concerned. Hospitalization, I was in there for a good day or two for one time in my life or whatever, and I didn't think you all really dissed me because I didn't get a flower while I was up in there. But I'm just saying, right? I'm just saying the hospitalization part or whatever. If our committee, if the benevolent can send a card, I think that will be more appropriate or whatever as far as that's concerned. Flowers tend to die after a while. Cards are still there, but for the purpose of death, I do think that we should have a policy where we do, in fact, send something as far as the flowers or to the immediate family that's identified, because I don't want you to have 3 or 4 grandmothers or things, and I know that's not the case, but I'm just saying, if we're saying a family member, I think we need to identify those family members so it's not the 3rd, 4th, 15th cousin. So with some guidance, I think the death is fine, and whether or not it goes from the death to the memorial, I have no objections to. But the birth and the hospitalization, I'm thinking, nothing more than just a card. As far as flowers is concerned, looking at your budgets and things of this nature, I'm kind of want to refrain from those. But death, I can go with.
All right. Any other thoughts on this as far as? Yeah, I was having a conversation with Anita this morning, and we kind of brought it up before. We're not a business, obviously. Businesses do this stuff all the time, but they're not funded by taxpayers. But we still do have HR obligations, and we want to hire and keep the best employees. And when these types of situations happen, this isn't advocating. I'm just mentioning it as part of the thought process. Is that maybe it's something that adds to keeping and attracting the best employees we can for the county, knowing that the people that they work for and with care about them. But again, this isn't a business, so you always try to balance those two things. We're not here to make a profit. We're here to wisely spend the taxpayers' money. So I have my own thoughts on that, and I'll express it when I vote. But if there is a motion on the floor at some point, or if we're just gonna smile at each other all day. So I don't know if anybody has any other thoughts about this, or is ready to make some sort of motion on this. Mr. Tripp,
Isn't this an item for finance more?
it's a policy issue right now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, we're the policy
gotcha.
body.
Okay.
But the policy, well, I will make the motion that we can update the flower fund to limit to just the death and memorial. But a $50 saving bond I can't do, and the hospitalization I can't do. So my motion will stand to update the policy to for expenditure to the, for the policy to be amended to include the death and memorial.
For employee and for spouse, parent, child, brother, sister of an employee?
For
The way, because we have to. It's
immediate family, and so that'd be it can be the spouse, not the grandma, excuse me, the spouse, or the employee, or the employee's spouse. You can.
All right.
Would you, I think that.
Mr. Vickery, could you, the microphone?
As outlined in the Flower Fund presentation before us, I think that covers a base, covers all the bases. Not immediate family member. The county board chairman may grant up to $25 in an unusual circumstance.
That's too vague.
That's the old.
It's pretty big.
I say that's the one, I kind of like the wording on that. I mean,
Can I ask a question? And your motion stands as I ask the question, and then we'll look for a second. Is it proper to vote whether we keep it or get rid of it? And then if we keep it, amend it after that to what you're saying?
Well, mine is that we amend it. So my motion would be that we will amend it.
Okay.
And that way it doesn't negate it, because there is some good in it. And it doesn't absolutely, do away with it or keep it as it is. It just says,
Sure.
let's amend it, and then we can kind of come up with, how we want it amended. But the motion would be that we look at it and amend it, but limit it to death and memorials, not the birth and hospitalization. Not to stop them, but a car can be sent. It's just that I don't want flowers to be sent.
Because right now our cap, I believe, is 40.
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry. Right, because it's been 40, and I just pay the amount that's above 40 is what I've been doing internally out of my pocket. But so you're saying remove those things and make it 50 for everything?
No, what I'm saying is, if we come to the agreement, I'm eliminating the birth $50 saving bond.
Right. We eliminate
and the hospitalization. I am keeping the death and memorial.
Right, and those are two different dollar amounts, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to make those both 50?
Yeah, we need to put it wherever that it will feel comfortable. I don't know the flower rate. I know when we send them out, the basic ones you can get, they're at 40 would be way under.
It's hard to find.
So right. So what I'm saying is that we have to amend that up to whatever the kind of the cost is now. So 40, I have no objection between someone has 70 and the $5 delivery charge. I have no objection in that.
So your motion is for 70?
Yes, as is written in the death, and then just equalize. But the memorial is where I would have.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was looking at the one that actually is on the file that we have to amend, not the one that was proposed and was never accepted. This is the one we're dealing with here, because that's the one that's in our policy book.
Okay, so
the
what
one
I'm
that was
looking at,
updated in 2004 but never approved, I have
Right.
to almost ignore that exists. Does that make sense? Because this is what's in our book now.
Okay, so if it's in there, it doesn't stop us from amending it to the up to what is the current rate of a flower right now?
It's
Have we been
40.
paying?
It's
40?
Yeah.
I'm talking about, that's what we've been,
That's what we've been doing, and it was done by voice. The former chairman said, do we want to keep it at 40? I don't know if you remember some of those meetings, but there was nothing codified about
right, but
that.
that I wanna kinda bring it up. I'm talking about, what does it cost us now? To call, yeah, I wanna kinda, you're right.
Is it around 50 for just a small whatever?
That's, that's minimal.
It was
It's
60
like
or
60
65
something, yeah.
because it was out of town. Couldn't find anything for 40.
No,
No,
you won't even find a basket for that, I mean.
70.
So that's why I looked at the 70 that they had here in the, I just looked at the difference.
Okay, and it's for both instances. If it's
Right,
an
in
employee
lieu of, if they so
or
choose.
an immediate, spouse, parent, child, brother, sister of an employee,
Right,
not parent. I don't see. Oh, parent. Sorry.
you got parent in
Yeah,
there.
parents in there. So it's 50 for everything. That's your motion.
That would be my motion.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
We did upgrade it from the 40. Well, they didn't go 75, we went 70.
It's 70
Right.
then for both.
Yeah, 70.
Okay, 70.
70 is where we went.
Clarify that for me, would you?
The motion is that the only memorials or flowers that would be sent would be for the death, and this is just administration. That's the policy that we can enforce. In the death of an employee, we'll update the wording because there is no benefits coordinator anymore. That's Anita. She wears lots of hats. Responsible for sending either memorial or flowers in the amount of approximately $70. I guess that approximately leaves us tax if it's 72 and shipping.
Yeah.
In the death of a spouse, parent, child, brother,
$5
sister,
delivery.
of an employee, same. So it's 70. So that's the county board chair, 25 flowers to the death of a family member not listed. We're going to strike that altogether.
Right,
That last one.
right.
Okay. All right. So we have a motion on the floor. Does that clarify?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a second to that, Mr. Washington? Any more discussion? Okay, I guess it can be.
I'm not quite
that's-
sure what we're
I
voting.
think it should be a roll call vote.
Yeah.
Mr. Tripp,
Aye.
Mr. Washington,
Aye.
Mr. Vickery,
Aye.
Mr. Snipes,
Aye.
Mr. Byrne,
Aye.
Ms. Weber, Mr. Wheeler.
I'm just saying that the one that was here, updated.
Yeah, he said that we weren't considering that.
You voting
We were
nay?
looking
I'm
at
voting
this,
nay.
and I moved
I think we should strike it all
some of that
together.
to 70,
Oh,
yeah,
I-
my opinion.
I would vote for that. I just want to be cooperative.
No, I understand. So we're going to send this on to the full board with the vote as the way it is. So, okay, now I can move on. The reason that I put this advisory referendum in front of you is because there's a lot going on in Springfield, and there's a lot not going on in Springfield, and it's become obvious to me over the past 6 years that I've really knew what was going on, that the less they fund there, the more they push to us. The less balanced their budget is, means they withhold money from us. We had it happen with highways. We've had it happen with all kinds of things. We sit with grant and aid. We wait 8, 9, 10 months for grant and aid, and that's money out of our pocket. That kills our cash flow. And I see Tom Latham sitting back there, and he knows exactly what I'm talking about. I call him about every 6 months and say, start calling people, because we need our money. And we can't be the only ones that are in this situation. And to me, I try to look through forest through the trees. Like, what's the root problem? Is that we have an Illinois Constitution that has, as part of it, a balanced budget requirement. And it's almost like it doesn't exist. And if the balanced budget requirement exists, people would have to make decisions in Springfield instead of kicking them to the counties and making us suffer for their inability to actually figure out how to manage this state. And so the reason I came up with this is this an opportunity for us to tell them, have the Attorney General enforce that mandate of the Illinois Constitution for a balanced budget? There's only one person that could get them in line, and that's the Attorney General of Illinois. And right now, the Attorney General is the daughter of the Speaker of the House.
Yeah.
Okay,
How's
so,
that gonna
and that's that's gonna change, obviously, here coming up shortly.
Well, yeah.
But that's the only person I can see that could ever interject any type of sense into this. And so this is meaningless, you know, the referendums and advisory stuff. It's just to get people to realize, you know, some things that may or may not be going on. We used it to have the county tell us that they want to reduce the size of the county board. We listened. It can only happen in years of the census, you know, so when we redistrict, that's when we can listen to that and go for a number that makes sense. But in this case, I really want this community to have an opportunity to say, stop, because it's killing us on our finances. We're tax capped, so we depend on every dime that's supposed to come from Springfield. And when they don't have a balanced budget and they decide to sweep something from one fund to another and don't send us our highway money, that has a direct impact, not just us, but on our residents. So that's why I'm asking for the executive committee to approve this advisory referendum question. And this week, this is the time we have to do it. It can't wait anymore. It has to go here into the full board. It can't be kicked to think about for another month. So that's why I'm throwing it to the group. Jim, you have anything?
Thank you. I make the motion to move forward and put this on the ballot.
Put it on the ballot. Is there a second? Mr. Vickery, any other comments or any questions? I guess, you know, it's pretty self-explanatory.
Do it.
We got it. Enforce it.
Yeah.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. I will, is there any other old or new business, Mr. Snipes?
Just one, and it's just the, I guess, to seek some information. I know that we don't have, or maybe we do, and I just don't know, an adjudication administration department here in the county. I do know that the state statute allows for us to have one. And so I'm looking at, is there the feasibility of, would it benefit us in that area, similar to what they do in the city of Kankakee and what they do in the other individuals, whoever, versus always popping into the court, having an adjudication department internalized here that for violations of any ordinances and things of this nature. So I guess right now it's exploratory, and where that should really go. I know it should be in the executive as far as that's concerned, because it's a decision, but to see if it's, have we looked in that area at all, or ever brought it up, or the
That's
feasibility?
one of the reasons that the state's attorney and I created the ethics commission, was for the violations of ordinances and ethics violations within the county. But as far as adjudication, you know, for anything that's non-ethics related, I would say that that's what the law is for. That's why we seek opinions from attorneys. That's my own opinion. I would not want a layperson. We have enough problems with that already, with people thinking they're lawyers and trying to make legal decisions. So I think maybe we should move and let the lawyers do their job.
Well, when I'm looking at the adjudication process, they are doing their job. It's like with the city, when they violate the ordinances, they, instead of bombarding the courts, they have that administrative adjudication, and at that time they make a decision. Those decisions are binding, so you just don't have.
But not for the city.
No, it is binding. That hearing also binds, and the only way you can go is through administrative review, and that's where they collect their fees and things or whatever for if you are dumping and doing something in a certain area, or if you're doing that. Basically, it's a it's legislated by the legislator. It's there for us to use. It's a way to not circumvent the court, but allow you to handle most of your ordinance issues, such as the building that you had over there, the hotel and all that. They would have went to your administrative adjudication. They wouldn't have been called up. So the only time they would have went to the court would have been.
That could have never happened through adjudication. Those issues are under state statute and building codes and all of that other stuff.
But that's up under your administrator. That's why I say look at it to investigate. Kind of look at the city and see what they do and see exactly what it is. But I do know that if they would have, the city would have brought it, because they've been able to close down the buildings in the whole 9 yards through their administrative adjudication. And the law says they have the same effect as law. But the thing is that under the administrative adjudication, they are reaping the dollars or whatever versus the court dollars, because you got to pay a fee and all that kind of stuff for the different lawyers and stuff. So what I'm saying is maybe we can kind of look for some of these nuisance things that are happening that keeps it up under our control because it deals with our ordinance. And then if they thought they was, the administrative adjudication hearing officer did not rule correctly, they have what they call 30 days to go before the circuit court. So I was just saying, just an option to look at because it's there on the books, and Cook County uses it and does a heck of a job. And to the bill, I mean, when you look at what they're bringing in, but I'm just saying, it's something to look at.
Well, if you want to bring it back and make a motion under, new business, we can put it out there and see if the committee wants to do that.
Just to explore it, that's what I would do.
I can mention it to the state's attorney offhand. There's certain powers the city of Kankakee has because they're home rule that we do not have. That's maybe part of it. The other part of it is we're subject as a county to building codes and standards that, and I'll use this as an example. I believe the adjudication process in the city of Kankakee said it was okay to do those nuisance ordinances in the city of Kankakee that ended up being overturned by the courts. So in that case, it didn't serve the publication or the population. They went through that adjudication process. I believe then they said it's okay to shut down these nuisance houses, but then all of a sudden that was found to be illegal and they couldn't do that through the adjudication process. So I'm very wary of modeling anything after the city of Kankakee.
Well, not modeling, I'm just saying
especially right now
adjudication.
these days. It's not functioning. So, Mr. Vickery?
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the adjudication thing was designed to, on parking tickets and stuff like that. We do it in moments, and I mean, most of those are simple infractions that, don't require to go to the courthouse,
Yeah, the Route 50
very
is a
simple.
whole separate situation that really would not apply to this because there's so many other things at play that definitely can't.
So that's why I looked at it.
Yeah, bring it back, and if you want to send Mr. Rowe an email to look at it, hey, that's what we're here for, So I would disagree, but that doesn't mean everybody else will. So that you have that right. Yeah. So anyway, any other questions, comments, motion to adjourn? Mr. Snipes, Mr. Washington, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Have a good day, Mr. Sprinkles.